Hi, and welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast Special Edition. Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Greenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in La La Land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. One of the problems was that the openness that they thought that they were going to have didn't happen or wasn't followed through with. So as I am, and openness takes time, I think, on all ends, right? It's a relationship and you are building this relationship. And I think when I started, I had some fears and I knew how important it was to my child, for the birth mom, for me too. That wasn't as important to me as what I was doing for my child. And in turn, it became, what am I doing for my family, for me, for them who are an extension of my family, which I very much feel right now. Now, I also understand that every person is different. Every situation is different. So it's hard to say when you don't know what you are stepping into. I have a beautiful relationship with our whole extended family, meaning my son's biological family, his first family. That took time. It took effort. It took losing each other for a while and finding each other again, which also helped in the growth of the openness. It actually made I think both of our hearts burst a little bit more when we found each other again and how happy we were for that. And after that, we've never left each other, and it's only grown. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Today, we're diving into Black hair care. My guest is Tamekia Swint, the dynamic founder and executive director of Styles for Kids. If you're in a transracial adoption, parenting a Black child, stop what you're doing and listen in. If you've never heard of Styles for Kids, you should, and likely you will, as Tamekia is expanding her vision far and wide. Tamekia's journey began in 2006 with a simple hair braiding class in Poland, inspiring her to create a hair braiding business upon her return to the U.S. Her encounter with a transracial adoptive mom highlighted the significant need for hair care support among transracial adoptive families and foster children, leading to the birth of Styles for Kids in 2010. I read something that blew my mind about a hair care bill. Okay.
I'm so excited.
Can you explain the significance of this? It's House Bill 5097 hair care bill in Illinois. Yes. What the heck is that? How is hair a governmental thing? And
Yes.
What does Styles for Kids have to do with this?
Yeah, well, I received a call from the legal team who was working on helping the two youth who are navigating through advocating for this bill at that time. They were helping them advocate for it, and they were looking for professional advice or professional opinion on things that they could include in their arguments in Springfield. And so I was excited to talk with the team and share my insight and experience over the last 13 years of working with families in the adoptive and foster care community, and able to share some things that they were able to actually take into their argument for the bill in Springfield, which is
okay. Back up for a second. Back up for a second. Who called you, and what is it that they're trying to pass? Like, what is the actual bill, and why? Yeah. Do you know all of that?
So HB 5097 is a bill that allows every child in foster care to have a hair care plan. And that hair care plan has to be developed in consultation with the youth and take into consideration their preferences and how they would like to have their hair styled and done. And it also advocates as part of the bill that the parents have to learn, right, and take an interest in making sure that their child's hair care needs are met, right? And the child has a say, which is just amazing.
This is that they have, brilliant.
Yes, it is so brilliant. And it was started by two young women who are foster youth, and they just were sick and tired, of there not being anything to advocate for children in care whose hair care needs were not being addressed. And I actually had the opportunity to interview them. If you can check that out, and I'll make sure I give you the link, Rebecca. I interviewed them on the Heritage Talks podcast, where they got to share their story of what motivated them to advocate for this bill. But they had a legal team that was representing them that was actually writing the verbiage for this bill. And the legal team from Loyola is who reached out to me to ask me about my opinion and my experience in working with foster youth and their families in their argument as they were going to Springfield to fight for this legislation. And I was just so happy to, give my 2 cents. And Rebecca, I have a lot of 2 cents to give.
You have like 4 cents, 10
yes,
cents. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of cents. 13 years of cents that were built up in this conversation.
Yes.
And so they were able to take some valuable insight with them and share in Springfield why this bill is so important and why it needed to be passed.
Yeah, talk to me about that. Why would we have a hair care bill?
Oh my gosh, this is something that has been central to my heart ever since I started working with Styles for Kids, working and creating Styles for Kids, is that children need to have a voice. And working with children over the last 13 years, what I've witnessed is that there are lots of decisions that are being made for them and they have no say. And so I was super excited to see that there was already youth in care who were advocating for themselves, because we were already working on a plan to bring parents together to advocate for their children, right, on behalf of the needs of their children who were in foster and adoptive care. We had already started this. And so when I heard this, I'm like, oh, we're just jumping on board with what you're already doing, because we're already in that mindset. And I saw a clear vision of where we were headed, and we're still headed there, to advocate on behalf of transracial adoptive families in regards to the same thing. There needs to be more education. I feel like we have a system where children, Black children especially, are disproportionate. And then on top of that, we're putting them in homes with parents who are not capable, right? Not because they're not willing, but they're not capable because they're not even understanding what they're getting themselves into, right? And that is that I am adopting a child of a different race. I am fostering a child from a different culture, and none of that is being taken into consideration when they're placed in my home. And so we were already on the path of advocating for children by utilizing their parents to do that. So when this bill came out, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because now the kids have a voice and they're able to say what it is that I want, how I want to wear my hair, which is an important part of your identity and self-expression. And no one should ever have to have decisions made for them and not have a voice when it comes to how you want to look and how you want to express who you are as an individual. All of my experience in working with transracial adoptees who are adults now, what they say is that they didn't have a voice. And because they didn't have a voice, it's impacted them as adults, where I can't even speak for my own needs or concerns. And people think it's just about hair. It's so much deeper than hair. Hair is just the sounding board or where it starts from. And then it goes down into all these other issues that children are struggling with. Peer pressure. We're struggling with self-image. We're struggling with that sense of identity. We're struggling with the sense of connection to our culture. We're struggling to try to find our place in the world. And so hair is a central part of that, because it's the first place where we learn how to express and develop that in life. And so if you're not able to do that, then it impacts every other area. And so what the bill is doing is giving children the right to be able to have a say, which is the most important part of this bill to me. And then secondly, to have their hair done and have adults be accountable, right? Because if we're not accountable, then sometimes we overlook what's needed, not understanding the long-term impact that it's having on our children.
Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap podcast, where we guide you every step of the way on your adoption journey. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Lucrece Bundy. Lucrece is not only an experienced adoption attorney, but also a passionate advocate for families navigating the complex world of adoption. Originally from West Africa and now a longtime resident of Omaha, Nebraska, Lucrece has dedicated her career to helping hundreds of families successfully adopt children. Lucrece founded her own adoption law practice in 2016. Her deep commitment to her faith and her clients led her to identify a significant gap in the information available to prospective adoptive parents. Information that, if known, could save them thousands of dollars and years of heartache. So before getting your home study, which is officially the first step, I'd love to work a little backwards. What are some of the consequences if you don't invest in resources first?
Yeah, so what I've seen with, hundreds of families over almost a decade of practicing law and also just, helping families through the adoption process is that they make a lot of costly mistakes when they just jump into the adoption journey without first taking the time to kind of examine or understand what the process actually is going to be like, what it's going to take, the step-by-step process that they need to actually, go through to do their adoption. So actually, one of the biggest mistakes that families make is to do their adoption home study first. I advise my families that the first thing they actually need to do is understand all the different options available to them. I mean, you have to know what's available. You have to know the pros and cons of each. You have to know the cost of each before you even dive into your home study, because your home study is tailored to the type of adoption that you choose. So I actually teach my families, don't just dive into your home study because everybody's telling you to. Take the time to really understand what your options are, the pros and cons of each, the cost of each, so that once you pick, international adoption or foster care adoption, newborn adoption, you are confident that that's the way you want to grow your family, and then you can invest in that path and go down that path.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And also, even, you had mentioned starting before the home study and doing all these things. And the home study is only good for a year. Yeah. So if you start your home study and then figure out, oh, I actually want to do this, or, something changes in what you originally thought, or you even start working with a consultant, right? Which we'll maybe talk about later, but you've already wasted so much time with your home study that you could have saved before, and maybe saved yourself from renewing the home study, which costs a lot of money.
Absolutely. And I'm surprised all the time. There's so many families that come to me and they're dead set on domestic newborn adoption.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, that's just what they heard on social media and they just think that that's the best way to go. And after we start working together, a lot of my families have changed their minds after they actually understood the pros and cons and, like foster care adoption, for example. There's a lot of confusion around that. People think they have to be foster parents first. But once they understand, adopting from foster care, some families actually change their mind and they decide, you know what, in this season of our lives, we really want to give a safe home to a child who's already looking for a family. We're well suited for that. And that's actually the way we feel like we need to go as a family. So that's why I just stress the importance of making that decision first. What type of adoption do I really want to do? But doing it with the understanding of what it entails, the step-by-step process, pros and cons, costs, and all of that, before you ever even think about doing a home study.
Yeah, such a good point. Yeah. So when I think of adoption, there's some big buckets that I can think of. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on resources for each of them. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to kind of throw out some of these buckets that I think of. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So the two biggest setbacks that I think of fall under financial and emotional. If that's true, and you also believe that, are there resources that can potentially help with both of these big buckets?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think for the emotional piece, when the families understand what to expect, it actually really helps to calm them down. I feel like it's like with anything in life, when okay, this is what's expected of me, you don't have to worry and wonder what's going to be my next step. What do I have to do next? Or you already know what's coming and you can prepare for it. And so as far as the emotional piece, I really encourage families, again, you want to take the time to understand, you need a bird's eye overview of the process. That way you're not wondering, okay, if I call the caseworker and I do this, then what happens? And what if I call the agency? And what if they don't answer back? All these questions you have. When you have a bird's eye overview of what the process should look like, for you, then it really reduces that emotional angst that a lot of families have starting the process and really just not knowing where to start, what to do, what to expect. Also, for the emotional piece, I really encourage families to also be a part of a Facebook group. I know a lot of people are not on Facebook anymore, but basically find a community that's going to help give you emotional support throughout the process. So the professional you pick may be a good source for that, not always. I usually recommend people making sure you have family members, friends who you can call and say, this is what's going on. Help me, pray for me, if you're a believer. But that support helps so much to know that somebody knows what you're going through, that they care, and that you can actually just share with them what's going on and get that emotional support. So as far as emotional support is concerned, that's what I would say. Knowing the process really helps bring you that peace of mind. And then having people in your life that you can talk to, that's not just the professional you're working with, but other people that you can talk to. And even other parents that have adopted before, that can tell you it's going to be okay. We've gone through this too. Just really helps you to know, okay, I'm not alone. They've gone through this too. It's going to be okay. So that community, I think, is really important for families, for the emotional.
Can the dream of adoption become a reality without breaking the bank? Well, that's a fair question, and one that we're going to dive deep into today. Today, my special guest is Kelly Ellison, whose 25-year journey in the nonprofit world and as a social entrepreneur have made her a beacon of hope for adoptive families. In fact, For the past 10 years, Kelly and her team have assisted over 5,000 prospective families navigate the financial challenges that they experienced along their journey to parenthood. And she is here to share some practical tips and strategies on how you can afford adoption with us today. Can you share any common myths and practical steps to overcome them using your programs?
Probably the first myth is I'm going to get grants to pay for all my adoption. That's probably the first and biggest myth.
Okay, yeah.
No, you're not. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get grants to pay for all of your adoption. A foundation does not want to pay for all of your adoption.
Uh-huh.
Kind of our formula is a third, a third, and a third. So a third of it is your own money. A third of it is going to be loans and family gifts. And a third of it is going to be grants and fundraising. And it's very often we'll have people that will say to us, I'm not taking a loan out for my adoption, dig their heels in. I'm not doing that. I don't want to borrow money. Okay, that's perfectly fine. So then you need to adjust your formula. So then you need to do more fundraising. Another myth.
What was the second third again? There was family and what?
So it's a third of it's your own money.
Yeah.
That's part of the contribution. A third of it is going to be loans and family gifts.
Loans and family gifts. So
Yeah.
a loan is different than a grant. So
Right.
a loan would be from a bank, credit card,
family member, credit line,
Okay.
credit card. We don't, 401k, 403b. That's
Okay.
a loan. Okay.
Okay.
And then the last quadrant is going to be fundraising and grants.
Okay.
Now, you might be asking, why aren't employer benefits included in that? Why isn't the adoption tax credit included in that? Well, here's why. They're not a part of that initial funding. That's after the fact.
Yes.
That is going to be upon finalization. So you don't want to count money that you don't have yet. But a good rule of thumb is for those people that are like, I'm not borrowing any money for my adoption. Well, okay, that's fine. It's not our job to tell you how. It's our job to educate you.
Joining me is a remarkable pioneer, not once but twice over. Picture this. A woman who has not only shattered glass ceilings in the corporate world, but has also redefined the adoption landscape with her pioneering spirit. Intrigued? You should be. Meet Linda Sexton, a force to be reckoned with, engineer turned adoptive mom, author, speaker, and advocate extraordinaire. Tell me about Out of Spoons.
Oh, Out of Spoons. Yeah. So, I have to say, Out of Spoons is a term that we use in our family, and I'll explain it in a minute. But I want to say first that my children, both of them, did need help and therapy as they grew up, particularly in those teen years.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they were in an open arrangement, adoption is something that a child really needs to reckon with. And we found that when both of them got to be teenagers, particularly, they did need some help and therapy.
Yeah.
And one of the therapists that Finley was going to as a teenager had suggested this idea of spoons. And the way they described it is you only have so much emotional bandwidth to deal with something. So you may be grieving something or feeling something about it, and you can talk about it for a while. You can just let all those emotions out. But at some point, you're out of spoons, right? You only have so much you can deal with. So when
I'm often out of spoons.
You're out of spoons. So, if I saw that something's bothering my kids and I say, okay, you want to talk about it? They said, Mom, I'm out of spoons. And that was my signal. Just leave it alone. Now's not the time. Maybe you can come back to it later, but I am out of emotional spoons today and leave me alone. So it's just a fun sort of shortcut that we have when my kids look at me and say, out of spoons, Mom, not right now.
I absolutely love that. So I'm curious if anyone listening has a phrase like out of spoons. It reminds me also of I started talking to my son, who is currently 12 and a half, about if he's out somewhere and, he's not going to parties or anything really yet, maybe some bar mitzvahs here and there. But if he wants to come home or needs me to pick him up, what's that word if he doesn't want to say that in front of his friends?
Oh,
And
right.
so we have our word, which I know is an important thing for teenagers too, to have with their families, like if they're ever in trouble or if they ever need you, like what's the word? Or if you're at a party, right, and they're like, I gotta get out of here, if you're at a family thing or something,
Yeah.
what is that thing that they can say to you? So that is what it reminds me of. I love it. Let's talk about your book a little bit. The Branches We Cherish, an open adoption memoir. What inspired you to write this book, and what message do you hope readers are going to take from this?
Inspiration for this actually came 30 years ago, because I mentioned I was in awe of the process. And I will say that the process is hard for any waiting parents. There's no question about it. And we did have the opportunity to actually speak with a number of expecting moms. I know that's kind of unusual, and there are reasons for that. And I do talk a little bit about that in the book, but I took really good notes, because it was very interesting for me to learn about this and learn about what people thought. And I guess I had that idea in my head that, I probably need to share this one day. And when I retired, I finally sat down to share it, but I recognized that open adoption, even though it makes so much sense to adoptive parents, is so scary, right? It's a frightening concept, because you think about how awkward is it going to be to raise a child with the birth parents in the picture? Or you wonder, what does visitation really look like? And, a year, 5 years, 20 years down the road. You also might be worried about, how's my child going to react to this, that they've got, a couple of sets of parents, and are they going to get confused, and are they going to want the birth parents more than they want me? Or if a birth mom comes back and holds her baby and sees her baby, is she going to want that baby back? Right?
All those myths that we have in our heads.
Through your head. And I thought, there's so many hopeful waiting parents out there. I thought, I need to share this story. And so that really inspired me. And I wrote my memoir, and lots of ups and downs with getting it out and getting it published. But I will say that I learned so much from writing this memoir and researching and getting feedback that I really didn't expect. So I found out a couple of really important things. One thing is that the birth moms, especially after the visits with us, which were always so much fun and enjoyable, and we loved seeing each other. But after the visits, they would go back home, and it really opened up a lot of wounds and grief and depression, which they didn't share with me at the time. They shared with me when I interviewed them for the book, but they kind of hid their grief from us, if you will. And I learned that my children's birth parents, all four of them, really did need help and support, professional help and support and therapy post-placement. And they did not get it. They did not get it.
Important.
And then the other thing that I learned is that my children, who I thought would have no adoption-related issues because we were so open, did have adoption-related issues. And then I learned that 1/3 of all children or all adolescents referred to for psychotherapy are in fact adopted. Adopted children often need help and therapy and support. So what I decided once I got the book out is that 100% of the profits from The Branches We Cherish are going to go to nonprofit organizations that provide support and therapy to birth parents and adopted persons post-placement. Because that need is so great and the resources available
Bravo.
don't match the need, right? So that's my way of giving back, because I was so fortunate, and I just really discovered that those two groups still need a lot of help that in many cases they're not getting.
Wow. Drug exposure and all the things. So we had a really, really serious conversation about the reasons that they started this journey to begin with, and how fear can make you feel false evidence appearing real. But another thing I learned, and I think I've mentioned this in past recordings, is that the feelings that we feel when we are in fear are manifest the exact same way in our body as when we feel excited. Think about that. So with just a shift of the brain, you can tell yourself, I'm super fearful of this journey and what it might mean in the future, or I'm really excited about this journey and what it might mean in the future. It's a blank slate and we don't know what that is, and that's exciting to us. Yeah, it's scary. But let's talk about, if you really sat down, and even if you got pregnant and you didn't smoke and didn't drink and didn't, and you were as healthy as anything, if we sat down and really went through with you what it means to be a parent and all the scary things and unknowns that are about to come into your life, would that also paralyze you from giving birth? The chances of your child having something is probably high. I don't know. But, there's a lot that can go wrong and there's a lot that can go right. And our mind is powerful, and our conversations are powerful. And there is support to take advantage of. So don't think you can go through this process alone. Don't think when you start the adoption journey that the end result is simply bringing a baby home, because if that is your only thought, and okay, I'm going to back up a minute. I'm going to give you all the benefit of the doubt and say, of course, that's what you want. And that's what your first thought as you enter the journey is, that is the end result. That is what you hope for. When that happens, all your dreams will come true. Yes, and everything in life is a yes, and. I hope that once you start learning about adoption, you enter the journey. Just as with any parenting, the end result is not to have a baby and be done. No matter who your child is and where they came from and how they came into your life, you have to also learn how to be the best parent for your child. So there is so much. Adoption is complicated. It is. And there are things that you will have to bend on in your life that you are not doing currently. Your life will need to change in some ways, and mostly it will be enhanced in most ways. And it requires some muscles to be used along the way that are maybe a little uncomfortable, and that's okay. You need to put yourself also in the shoes of your child. And in order to do that, you have to do as much as you can to understand what they might be feeling and what they might be going through. So all of this is a journey that's layered upon layered upon layered, and nobody gets it except for the people who have gone through it too and experienced all the things that you're experiencing. So if you think you can do this without community and be in a silo, can you? Of course you can. You're gonna suffer through it. I promise you that. And so will your child. So I want you to just think about all of this, right? Yes, fear is real and it can paralyze you if you let it. Your mind is powerful. You can make a decision about anything and truly believe it at any given time. I've done that so much in my life. People will accept your decisions. People will not accept your decisions. Whatever you decide, you have to feel at peace with that, and you have to stand firmly in your convictions and you have to stand your ground. And so here are the things I want to know that I asked at the beginning. One, I would love to hear from you either in comments or DM me. What do you accomplish before 9 a.m.? I really want to know. But even more so, I want to know if you think there should be an age cutoff for infant adoption, for adopting a baby. Is there an age that is too old to be bringing a baby into your life that maybe is not fair to the child? And does it make a difference if it's celebrities? And should I be making, as a somebody who's helping somebody through that process, if somebody is going to give them a home study anyways, should I be helping them regardless, even if I have feelings about it one way or another? I don't know. These are questions I grapple with. Providers. So you want to find either a licensed adoption agency or a social worker who can provide home studies. Again, it has to be in your state that you live in, and sometimes they can do throughout the state, other times just in your specific area. So let's talk a little bit about how to find the right home study agency for you. And I have 4 questions I'm going to go through that you need to ask to vet the right agency. But before we do that, let me just tell you how you can get your hands on our freebie today. Finding a home study agency is really not as important as finding the agency or multiple agencies that you're going to work with for a placement, unless it happens to be the same agency. And there's certain times that makes sense and certain times it doesn't. We're not getting into that today. You want to make sure that they're licensed to do home studies. Most agencies will conduct home studies, although not all. There are also, like I said before, some social service entities, and there are also standalone home study only organizations. If you know someone in your state that has adopted, go ahead and ask them who they used. Usually an agency will work throughout the state. So if you know somebody in your state, no matter if they're close to you or not, it's probably a good place to start. But let me tell you something, and listen up. This is the one and only time you can ask other people who they used and then follow their advice. It's the one and only time during a home study where I advise that you can ask other people who they used and then follow their advice, because oftentimes just because somebody used a specific agency to place with, that they matched through, does not mean it's a good fit for you. There's too many other factors. We're not going to talk about this today, but for the home study, go ahead and ask your friends who live in the same state. You just don't want to compare your journey with anybody else's. Okay? Hey there, hopeful parents. I have a question for you. Ever thought about adopting as a single parent? Well, buckle up, because today's guest is about to take us on a wild ride through the twists and turns of single parenthood through adoption. I'm thrilled to welcome my ride or die, Carrie Hackett, to the show. Carrie and I go way back, bonded by our journey to motherhood. From day one to today, our friendship has weathered it all, just like Carrie's journey as a single mama through adoption. Today, Carrie's opening up about her real deal experiences, from the heartwarming highs to the tear your hair out lows. With a daughter who's a force of nature at age 11, Carrie's experienced it all. Her family is beautifully transracial, and her daughter's adoption is fully open. So we'll be sure to touch on that too.
Yeah. One thing I think that comes to mind when you mention that about the time and, sort of trying to, I used to joke about like sort of waiting for the guy to come through on the horse and,
Yeah.
not gonna happen. But what I remember very well is, I have friends who, really wanted a family and sort of watched from the side and sort of asked me questions, or, some I went so far as to go with them on appointments to learn more about having a family on their own, and just never pulled the trigger. If I had $1 for every woman who ended up not marrying, and at some party or some meeting at work or at some event pulled me aside and said, I have to tell you, I wish I had done it. And I would have
Amen,
a healthy
sister.
savings account.
Right?
It was really eye-opening to me. And I look back and really am very grateful that I moved through the fear, and that listen, I did not do, I will say, I make it sound like, oh, I handled this all on my own. I have a wonderful family network.
Mm-hmm.
I have wonderful friends, as you know, and people who are in my corner. And my tribe is fantastic. There's no better tribe than my tribe. And I'm very, very thankful and grateful. And so, but ultimately you do it by yourself. And I am so thankful that I just kept pushing, because I look back, I'm 56 years old, and,
Mm-hmm.
I have an almost 12-year-old. I'm so thankful I'm her mom. I'm so grateful that
Mm-hmm.
I get the opportunity to be a parent. And, I spent my weekend of my birthday at a dance competition, and I was exhausted, but seeing her up there winning award after award for her dance and smiling and doing her hair and her eyelashes, and, it's the stuff that,
You dream
parents
of.
do. Yeah.
And
And
it's the stuff we dream of. Yeah.
yes, it was what I wanted. So that was a surprise. Other surprises are, one of the surprises I think was also just the assumption about you being married. I'm sure you get this all the time. I'd be at a party or in, a community event at the school or something, and people just automatically, if you were standing next to a man, would be like, oh, and is this your husband? No, it's my girlfriend's husband. But anyway, awkward, or like, you'd be on the playground and someone would compliment Grace, on her eyelashes or her beautiful hair or something. And they'd be like, oh, I bet daddy, doesn't want you to grow up, and we just kind of laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we take the opportunity to correct, it depended on the situation and how long you're
Mm-hmm.
talking to someone. And if you wanted to get into it, but yeah. And then, we're a transracial adoptive family. So that adds a layer, I've been called the babysitter, like, oh, are you
Mm.
babysitting for her? When I brought her to doctor's appointments, I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
I'm dragging someone else's kid to my doctor's appointment. People have flat out asked me when she was a baby, is that your baby? Like, yes, yes, she's mine. And have her like on my chest and walking through the grocery store with her, you know.
Oh, the things people will say or ask
Yeah,
or want to
yeah,
know. And
you
yeah,
know,
I get
so
it.
you just get used to it. And, for those new adoptive parents or those that are considering it, you get used to it. And the great thing about adopting, at least for me, I was very grateful and thankful to have adopted newborn. You have time to practice your answers while they're a baby.
Yeah,
So, you
good
can
point.
practice like how to answer those questions about the husband and the color of her skin and, who
Mm-hmm.
are you and to her and those kind of questions. You have time to practice it so that by the time they're older, and can comprehend what's happening with them, your answers are so confident that, I see with Grace, her answers are confident now when she gets them. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes I'll show up, like, she has a new grade every year, new kids, and I show up to a parent event and they sort of look at me and look at her and they're like, that's your mom? Like kids are funny. They just say it out loud. Hi. It just takes them a minute and then they sort of get over it. Or Grace will be like, yeah, and or Father's Day stuff, like, she'll be making something for her two uncles, and they're fantastic, and they treat her like the princess she is, and she'll make things for them at Father's Day, and kids will be like, what are you doing? She's like, well, I don't have a dad. It's just very transparent, honest, raw, if you will, and people are sort of like, oh, okay, um, and some people actually don't even like, they don't find out that Grace is adopted for a while, and then they meet me and they're like, we get into more in-depth conversation and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I just thought you had a husband, like, so some of that stuff is surprising about
Yeah.
assumptions people make, but you get through it.
Do you think there are advantages to parenting as a single woman, as a single
Mm,
mom?
I do. It may sound like, I don't know, it may sound kind of selfish, I'm not sure. I really like making the decisions myself. I like, and
Me too.
maybe it's a tad type A controlling personality possibly, but I like making the decisions on vacations. I like making the decisions about her
Mm.
health care. I like making decisions about how I, help her with school and what she pursues as extracurricular activities. She's a dancer, as I mentioned. Those things are, I like sort of being the one that, makes all the decisions, and I don't have to consult with anybody. I don't have to negotiate. I don't have a mother-in-law. No, Just kidding. Some people love their mother-in-law.
Right.
There are wonderful mother-in-laws in the world. But I don't have to deal with another family or sharing her time. Like, I obviously have friends who are married and may have ended up divorced, and this balance with another parent of sharing a kid on weekends and things like that. I just, truthfully, I have her all to myself, and it's kind of great. I remember one time when I said to Grace, like, well, maybe I'll do a little dating, you're older now. And, and she's like, no. Mm-mm. And I'm like, what? Why not? I mean, don't you want, like, wouldn't it be fun if I had a boyfriend or, maybe even a husband? She's like, no, I like it the way it is. Don't date.
That's so nice.
So, yeah, we have a nice thing.
Yeah. My son always did want me to find someone, and, he wanted a daddy. Yeah. And this was pre his birth father coming into our lives, and he kind of backed off after that. He's very supportive, though, if and when I do go out on a date. Yeah. But recently, it has just like hit me like a ton of bricks that I really love our family unit of the two of us. Like, and I think it comes with, I don't know, a lot of TV shows with dysfunctional families and movies, and you see like how one parent could be great and the other parent might not be, and you just never know. And I'm not, obviously every family is different, but it just made me step back and realize, we have a good thing going. Yeah. And
very blessed.
I feel like he sees that as well. There's definitely a lot of positives to be in a sense of pride, right? That that we are making the choices, whether it's good choices or bad choices. Right. Listen, every parent struggles with that. But welcome back to the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with someone whose heart and dedication have touched countless lives over the past 26 years. Lori Shelton, an adoption specialist, has guided over 750 birth parents through some of the most important decisions of their lives. Lori started her journey answering a newspaper ad as a pregnancy counselor, unaware that it would lead her to a fulfilling career in adoption. What do you think is the biggest challenge today for birth families as well as hopeful families considering adoption? And is there a way we can better support them?
So that goes back to something we said before. I'm going to say the answer to that is finding ethical, licensed, good professionals, and knowing, I think unfortunately, like the people that have the most money is who people find first when you're searching for a professional online, and they're not always the best people to find.
Interesting. Okay. So are you saying that that's a big challenge to finding the right places to work for, or is the biggest challenge for
both moms and families? Like, how do you know who you're finding? And you're finding because people are searching, and you're searching. Yeah. It's kind of like the book, I'm sure you've read, Relinquished. She talks a lot about like advertising and all of that stuff. I think that's the biggest challenge today for moms and families. And so how do we make that better? Yeah. Well, personally, I think you're already doing it by having this podcast and educating people about what's available to them. And I love that you have a voice in this space. And I think I'm doing it by being a part of Pear Tree. So, it's just getting the word out. And
Pear Tree also has a great podcast too called Modern Adoption, correct? Is that what the name is?
That is correct. It's called Modern Adoption with Jess and Aaron, or Modern Adoption with Aaron and Jess. I think it's with Jess and Aaron. But yes.
I'll link that in the show notes too. Yes. It's also a great one.
Yes. I'm telling you, these two podcasts are in my ears every time it drops. Like I don't
Me too. Me too. You had a quote on your LinkedIn account, which I'll link in the show notes. You can all check out Lori in LinkedIn. But her quote says, "Just when the caterpillar thought the world was ending, he turned into a butterfly." And that quote speaks a lot to transformation. So how has this philosophy, this quote, guided you personally and professionally, especially navigating the complexities of adoption?
I love, first of all, that you like really dive deep into all of your questions and like researched me. I was like, wow, what a
yeah,
question.
we stalk. Yes, we stalk.
I would say that it really goes back to all about trust. Like, I'm a really spiritual person. And I believe there's a bigger picture to this entire process. And so to me, it's a matter of letting go of control of things that we can't control. And there's always a silver lining if you look for it. Trusting in the process, and the process, life is the process, adoption is a process. So that's kind of why I say that. And it just means a lot to me.
And this is why I love you so much, because I'm the same way. Lori, this was filled with golden nuggets. So I loved that you were part of this podcast. And Lori, thank you for being the president of the Adoption Roadmap Podcast fan club.
I'm like, what am I the president of?
I get the best messages from you, and I really appreciate you listening to words. But do you have fears of not passing an adoption home study, maybe because of past demons or due to a medical condition you have? Have you heard about how intrusive a home study can be, or how much paperwork you'll have to complete? Well, you're in for a treat today, because we're going to get to the truth about all of this and more. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Amy Imber, the powerhouse behind Connecting Hearts Adoption Services. With over 2 decades in the adoption field, Amy's passion was ignited in high school when she saw a friend, adopted as an infant, reunite with her birth parents. After working in adoption for many years as an adult, Amy met her brother, who was placed for adoption as an infant more than 50 years ago. Fast forward to today, Amy Imber is not just the executive director of Connecting Hearts and the mother of 2 teenage boys. She's been the driving force since its inception in 2008. I'd love for you to share any heartwarming or memorable experiences of families you've worked with that kind of illustrate the impact of adoption in their lives.
Well, so my agency has a private Facebook group for just our agency families.
Okay.
So every once in a while, people will ask to join our group, and they have to answer a couple questions. And if the answer, the question, I think the only question is, did Connecting Hearts Adoption complete a home study for you? And if they say no, then obviously we don't add them to our group.
Right.
But we have a group of probably about 900 plus families.
Wow.
And every once in a while, I will get a phone call or an email when there's an agency or an attorney that's looking for a specific family for an expectant mom that they don't have within their bank of waiting families.
Mm-hmm.
So we easily have probably over 100 families well over 100 families in 15 years. But in the past year, we probably have 50 families, maybe a little less, that have all been matched and placed simply because I shared a situation that was emailed to me. So that's always awesome. I just visited yesterday with a family that lives not far from me, that they, when I got to their home, I asked them if they had signed up with any agency or attorney after their home study had been done. And it's been about 9 months since their initial home study was completed, and they hadn't. And they had just kept putting themselves out there for a lot of the situations that I was sharing with them, because my agency does not place babies for adoption, and we do not work with birth parents. We solely provide the home study service.
Yeah.
But when I get an email or a phone call, I obviously share those with our waiting families. And so, and they got a phone. I got a phone call on a Saturday afternoon about a baby born. I shared the information online. I forwarded some emails to those that were interested, and they got picked and literally became parents like the next day. So that's always exciting.
Yeah.
And that happens, I don't want to say often, but often enough to mention it.
Yeah.
I always remember there's this one family, oh my gosh, they lived out in like DeLand or DeBerry, like out the other side of Orlando. And I went to visit them the day before they were expecting me. Like, I messed up my appointment.
Oops. Oops, they hadn't cleaned their house yet.
No, they answered the door in their pajamas. It must have been like 9:30 in the morning. They answered the door in their pajamas. I felt so bad. I was like, guys, I can totally come back tomorrow.
You're like,
They're
I
like,
promise
"We're
you,
here."
this is not part of the
Yes.
plan. This isn't what we do.
They were like making breakfast. There were eggs on the stove. Like, it was like a whole deal. And they were like, you know what? You're here. Come on in. Let's get this done. Like, they were such good sports about it. But if they had wanted me to come back the next day, I totally would have done that. But I will never forget that. That was so, it's funny now. It was not funny then.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I love that. And that's awesome.
Love a client with a good sense of humor too.
Yes.
So appreciate it.
Absolutely. Especially when they're so nervous already. And they're just like, they didn't even have time to be nervous because they had no clue.
No, I mean, their house wasn't like in disarray, but they like clearly had not showered yet for the day. They had their breakfast. Like, I don't know if they'd had their first cup of coffee. And
see, you don't even need to shower to get home study approved.
Yes. No, it is not a requirement. It is suggested, but it is not.
Right. That's hilarious.
But yeah, so those are a couple things.
I love that. What advice would you give to individuals or couples considering adoption, particularly for people who feel so overwhelmed or uncertain about the process of adoption?
I think that connecting with other families that have successfully adopted is really important. And so I think, if you mention to a handful of your friends, we're considering adoption, because for a lot of people, this is still relatively private when they initiate the home study process. For some families, they've put it all out there, and other families are keeping it closer to their heart. Yeah. And I think that if you mention it to a few friends, you're going to find somebody who either has adopted, who has placed a child for adoption, has a friend that has adopted. It's really good to connect with other people. I think that's really important.
That sense of community.
Oh, absolutely.
Is so important. And I always tell people that it's not, your family and friends are very well-meaning people, but unless you've gone through this process, you have no clue, one, how to support somebody who is. So oftentimes you need to let them know how they can support you best, but just being able to have a conversation with somebody who gets it is so important. So that's great advice.
I think that's one of the things I like best about my Facebook group, because so many of these people have become friends with each other.
Yes. And, doesn't that make you feel great?
They get together for play dates periodically. They become, friends on social media. It's somebody to email or text when, oh my gosh, something's happening. I have to tell somebody, but I'm not sure who I can trust. Like, it's a great way to connect with other people.
That's awesome. And especially for your community who all live in the same state, there's probably a lot of people who live near each other. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And they adopt across Florida and across the United States. So it's not like, they're just adopting through my agency. My agency doesn't do that. So, there's lots of people with lots of strong opinions and that they're willing to share.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to end with some quick fire, rapid questions. First one is, what's the best compliment you've ever gotten from a client?
Probably their thank you. Probably thank you is awesome. Really, really nice to hear.
Yeah. What's been your biggest failure when working with a hopeful family, and what did you learn from it?
That's a tough question.
Maybe showing up on a doorstep on the
way. Really, right? But they took it in stride, so I wouldn't call it a failure. I would call that an oops.
Maybe that's a better.
I don't think that, and I mean, I'm certainly not perfect, but I think I wouldn't call it a failure. I would say it's disappointing when somebody presents that. I think that the most important thing somebody can do during this process is be honest. And when you are not honest, that jeopardizes us being able to approve your home study. And I think that has probably been the biggest challenge, is when somebody has not been honest.
Yeah.
That is hard.
Yeah. Especially when it's coming from a place of fear on their part, and it might not mean they're a bad person, but yeah. What's your biggest pet peeve?
So a lot of what we do is electronic, right? There's just a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
So sometimes when people are not as tech savvy, it's just a little frustrating. Yeah.
I get it. What's one thing about your business or this journey of your adoption business that you didn't expect?
I mean, probably all of it, as silly as that sounds. I never thought that I would own my own business and then find it to be successful. Like, that's two different things. And so it's been pretty awesome. I mean, I have a pretty cool job. Mm-hmm. And then to have all of these women that work with me be awesome at what they do, and to all represent Connecting Hearts Adoption in such an amazing light. Because in adoption, all you have is your reputation. Yeah. And we're really, really lucky to have a good one.
That's amazing. I hope you enjoyed this special episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, would you do me a huge favor? Do me a solid. Before the end of the year, I'd be so grateful in this month of thanks if you would just take 2 minutes out to write up a little review on this podcast, what you like, anything. You can just say, great podcast, whatever you think. It would mean the world to me. The more 5-star reviews and ratings that I have, the more people get to hear the work that we put in to educate people about adoption. So would you please do that for me? Thank you so much, and have a great holiday season. Bye-bye.